Tamron Hall, a poised and polished daytime host, welcomed a royal guest who had recently renounced his official palace duties but brought a distinctly regal attitude. What started as a seemingly gentle, soft-focus interview on the Tamron Hall Show soon spiraled into a dramatic clash that turned warm applause into stunned silence. The encounter became a duel of pride, power, and public truth, ending with the royals storming off stage and the anchor finally losing her cool. The cameras floated across the studio audience, capturing nervous smiles and the glossy sheen of the set before settling on the host herself. Tamron Hall sat with perfect daytime composure, shoulders squared, eyes bright, and palms open in a gesture of welcome. Her voice was low and warm, designed to encourage a relaxed atmosphere where guests might reveal more than they intended. "Your Royal Highness, Prince Harry, thank you for being here," she said, her voice laced with a subtle hint of playful informality. "We're truly honored." Harry entered to a round of generous applause, his familiar half-smile serving as a kind of shield. He was impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, his walk unhurried, a nod suggesting he was graciously allowing the room to breathe in his presence. His handshake with Tamron felt like a favor being granted. As he settled into his chair, he adjusted his cuff and scanned the crowd with the cool confidence of someone accustomed to rooms bending to his will. "Please, it's my pleasure," he said, his tone suggesting he was there to elevate the conversation, not simply participate in it. The initial questions were gentle and carefully phrased by Tamron, focusing on his foundation's new veterans program, a docuseries on resilience, and his public advocacy. Harry's answers were polished and expansive, more akin to a keynote speech than a one-on-one chat. He spoke in broad terms about cultural shifts, legacy systems, and the alchemy of telling one's truth, all while the audience nodded, lulled by his smooth cadence. Tamron maintained her smile as she steered the conversation toward a more personal topic. "You've used your platform to speak openly about mental health. What specific moment made you realize you had to go public?" she asked. Harry's smile cooled a degree. "I wouldn't reduce it to a moment," he replied, casually picking at non-existent lint on his knee. "It's a continuum. I've always understood, perhaps more than most, the weight of expectation. Sharing that understanding is leadership." Tamron absorbed his answer with a nod. "Leadership can be lonely," she offered. "How do you balance the need for privacy with the scale of your visibility?" "Privacy isn't the absence of a life," he retorted. "It's authorship. The difference seems to confuse people." A faint ripple of unease spread through the audience. Tamron inclined her head. "A fair point. But still, some viewers might wonder whether authorship becomes control. For example, with the book." Harry exhaled sharply through his nose, a soft, humorless laugh escaping his lips. "We're not doing the book question again, are we? I've addressed it 1,000 times. It was necessary. People read it because it mattered." Tamron didn't flinch. "They did," she agreed, her tone even and professional. "But because they read it, they also have questions. You've said the book was about healing. Do you feel healed?" "Healing isn't a destination," he said, his gaze lifting toward the studio lights. "But I'm certainly ahead of anyone who's still asking if it was worth it." The line landed like a shiny, dismissive coin. A few people in the audience tittered uncertainly. Tamron's smile tightened just a bit. "Let's talk impact then," she said smoothly. "Do you think any of your public choices have complicated relationships you might want to keep private?" "My private relationships are private because I choose that," he said, his words velvety but the point sharp as a razor. "Complication happens when people who aren't part of those relationships try to narrate them on daytime television." Tamron let the moment hang in the air before folding it neatly. "Understood. We'll stick to what you do want to narrate. You've criticized the British press and certain palace protocols. Is there anything you wish you'd handled differently?" Harry leaned back, taking ownership of the chair. "I handled things exactly as they demanded to be handled. Sometimes truth insists. And when truth insists," Tamron said softly, "do you ever worry it can also wound?" Harry met her eyes. "Truth doesn't wound. Hypocrisy does." Another ripple went through the audience. The band leader shifted on his stool, and a floor manager glanced nervously toward the control room. Tamron remained the picture of calm, crossing one leg over the other. "You've spoken beautifully about service," she continued. "Some viewers say they're confused by the tension between that and the commercial side. the streaming deals, the speaking tours, the branding. How do you define service now? His smile returned, bright and edged. Service is impact measured by outcomes, not optics. A deal that funds programs is service. I'm not sure why that's difficult. It's a sincere question, Tamron insisted. People associate royalty with duty, not business. And, Tamron, Harry cut in, his voice still soft but suddenly much colder. If people are comfortable, it usually means nothing important is changing. Discomfort is the tax of progress. Some audiences don't like paying taxes. A soft, collective ooh floated from the crowd. Tamron absorbed the sting without showing it. One more on that, she said. If discomfort is a tax of progress, how do you respond to those who feel you taxed family trust? That sharing private conversations erodes the possibility of reconciliation. He chuckled, a sound that signaled the pretense was over. People who worry about my family's trust are seldom in my family. And reconciliation doesn't start with silence from the person harmed. The polite scaffolding of the interview began to creak. Tamron kept her hands folded, like a surgeon preparing for a precise cut. Let's zoom in, she said. You told an audience last month that institutions rarely apologize first. If an apology did come from the press, the palace, anyone, what would it need to say? Harry considered this, his eyes half-lidded. It would need to say, we were wrong because we were invested in a version of you that served us. We're sorry we punished you for choosing yourself. Tamron waited for the soft applause to fade. And if that apology never comes, then I continue choosing myself, he said simply. I've learned to do that better than most. The statement hung in the air like a banner. Tamron let it flutter before reaching for a new card. We're almost at the break, she said, her smile returning to restore the room's pulse. Afterward, I'd love to ask about your upcoming projects and a question many viewers sent in about what accountability looks like when stories are told from one side. Harry's brow twitched, an almost imperceptible reaction. Happy to educate, he said, the word hanging heavy. The band played a tasteful chord, and the applause lights winked. As the crew moved to check microphones, Tamron kept her eyes on him, registering the sharp temperature drop. The interview had started as a stroll through a manicured garden of talking points. Now it felt like a hallway narrowing toward a door neither of them intended to open. They returned from commercial with their smiles reset. Tamron thanked the sponsor and the viewers before turning back to her guest. Prince Harry, she began, her voice tranquil. Let's talk accountability, yours and the media's. You've asked for it loudly from others. What does it look like when pointed at you? He tilted his head, a hint of amusement in his eyes. It looks like outcomes. Programs launched, lives improved. Conversations like this one moved past the shallow end. Tamron pressed gently. And when people ask for accountability on facts, on names, timelines, and receipts. Harry's gaze cooled another degree. People who deserve receipts know where to find them. The audience made a small, involuntary sound. Half gasp, half appreciative woo. Tamron sat a bit taller. She didn't raise her voice. She sharpened it. Fair, she said. Then let's agree to bring as much clarity as we can for the folks watching who don't know where to find them. He smiled without warmth. Clarity requires good faith. I hope we have that. Tamron's eyes flickered with a mix of hurt and frustration. She swallowed both. We always try, she said simply. The cameras captured the moment, two practiced professionals with a subtle rattle of sabers just under the desk. On the monitors, it looked serene. In the studio, it felt combustible. By the time the floor manager flashed the wrap sign for the segment, the fuse was glowing bright enough for everyone to see. The next questions would determine whether it burned out or burned the set down. The final commercial break ended with subdued applause. The earlier warmth had completely drained, replaced by an uneasy hush. Tamron Hall's signature smile was in place, but her eyes held a cautious calculation. She had handled world leaders and demanding celebrities before, but she could feel this conversation careening toward dangerous, uncharted territory. Welcome back, everyone, Tamron said smoothly, her voice betraying a hint of steel. We're here with Prince Harry, discussing his work, his journey, and the lessons he's learned along the way. Harry nodded, giving the audience a faint, almost dismissive smile. He leaned back in the plush chair, legs crossed, fingertips pressed together, looking a little too comfortable. Tamron shuffled her cards. So, Harry, before the break, you mentioned accountability. Let's dig into that. When you ask for accountability from others, like the press or even the royal family, do you feel you've shown that same accountability yourself? Particularly when it comes to what some describe as contradictions in your narrative? Harry's smile froze. Contradictions? He repeated, his tone incredulous. You mean when the media decides to frame my life with headlines they wrote before I even opened my mouth? That's not a contradiction, Tamron. That's projection. The audience gave a polite murmur, unsure whether to applaud. Tamron stayed composed. I hear you. But to be fair, it's not just headlines. People point to moments. For example, the desire for privacy, yet participating in high-profile interviews that put very private matters on the record. Harry gave a low, sharp chuckle. Ah, the privacy paradox. How original. Haven't heard that one before. His voice was now dripping with sarcasm. Let me educate. Privacy means choosing what you share, not surrendering your entire life. If people can't grasp that distinction, it says more about them than it does about me. The condescension in his tone hadn't gone unnoticed by the audience. Tamron's posture remained open, but her smile was taut. Of course, it's a nuanced topic. But don't you think the way you communicate that nuance sometimes gets lost? Perhaps because of the tone? Harry's brow arched. Tone. Forgive me, but maybe the issue isn't tone. Maybe it's that people aren't used to someone like me refusing to play along anymore. He leaned forward slightly. You know, Tamron, I've spent my entire life being told how to smile, what to say, and how to behave. If I sound sharp now, it's because I've earned the right not to pander. The audience gasped quietly at his edge. Tamron blinked once, slowly. She deliberately softened her tone. I understand the desire to control your own story. But do you ever worry that in defending yourself so strongly, you risk alienating people who actually want to support you? Harry's laugh was quick and clipped. People who want to support me will support me. I don't need to spoon-feed them palatable versions of my life for their comfort. If someone is so fragile that my honesty offends them, perhaps they were never truly supporters to begin with. The air in the studio tightened. Tamron's lips curved in her professional half-smile, but her eyes were cold. That's one way to look at it. Another is that people want connection, not correction. Do you think you sometimes underestimate how your words land? Harry tilted his head almost mockingly. With respect, Tamron, people spend too much time worrying about how words land and not enough time listening to what they actually say. If people misinterpret my intent, that's their burden. The audience was silent. Tamron folded her hands calmly in her lap. Let me ask this then. If your goal is to heal and move forward, why do so many of your public statements still focus on grievances with your past? Some might say that feels less like healing and more like reopening wounds. Harry's eyes narrowed. Grievances. Interesting choice of word. I call it truth. If people are uncomfortable with truth, maybe they should ask themselves why. His arrogance was now undeniable. He sat back again, chin slightly raised as if daring anyone to disagree. Tamron inhaled steadily, her professionalism holding firm, but the subtle tightening around her mouth signaled his dismissiveness was cutting close. Well, she said evenly. Our viewers sent in a lot of questions, and one theme that came up often was about family. Do you think there's a future where you reconcile publicly with them, or do you see the distance remaining permanent? Harry's smirk returned, cool and self-satisfied. Reconciliation isn't a performance for the public. It's a process, and frankly, whether the public sees it or not is irrelevant. People are obsessed with my family because it's easier than reflecting on their own. This time, the audience shifted audibly in their seats. A few clapped out of habit, but most stayed silent. Tamron held his gaze. I see. That's certainly a strong perspective. Strong. Harry repeated, savoring the word. Yes, strong and unapologetic, which I suspect is why I'm here and why people can't stop talking about me. It was the kind of line meant to dazzle, but it landed like a stone. The applause sign faded before the audience could react. For Tamron, the calculation in her mind was shifting. The prepared questions no longer mattered. A line inside her had started to burn. The royal smile lingered, but it was no longer charming. It was a challenge. The third segment opened with a palpable sense of tension. The earlier warmth had been completely replaced by an uneasy quiet. Tamron smiled into the camera, but her voice held a new edge of steel. We're back with Prince Harry, she said smoothly, and we've been having a very candid conversation. Harry leaned back, twirling his microphone cord, wearing the smirk of a man who believed he was winning a match no one else realized was being played. Candid is one word for it, he said. I prefer honest. Brutal honesty if necessary. It's about time people get used to it. Well, let's continue with honesty then, Tamron said, her posture upright. Some critics argue your advocacy often circles back to your personal grievances. How do you respond to those who say you've made your story bigger than the causes you champion? Harry gave a sharp laugh. Critics. The people who never risked a thing in their lives, but love to analyze mine. They don't deserve a response, Tamron. And if you're repeating their words, then maybe you don't either. The audience gasped audibly. Tamron's smile faltered for the first time. Still, she pressed on. I asked the question because our viewers want clarity. Do you feel your personal story strengthens your advocacy, or does it risk overshadowing it? Harry tilted his head, his eyes narrowing. My story is the advocacy. Without my experiences, none of these conversations would even exist. People don't tune in to hear generic speeches. They want me. And frankly, Tamron, they need me. The arrogance in his voice rang across the studio. The image of humility once associated with Harry was collapsing in real time. Tamron's jaw tightened. Some might say that sounds self-important. Some might, he replied with a grin. And they'd be right. It is important. And if it centers on me, that's because I'm the one carrying it. The words landed heavy. Tamron's warmth gave way to a cold restraint. Carrying it alone? She asked. What about your wife, your family, the people who support your foundation? Do they not deserve recognition too? Harry's smile cooled. Of course they do. But let's be honest, they follow my lead. Without me, there's no spotlight, no microphone, no movement. That's just reality. The audience groaned softly. That's quite a statement, Tamron said. You've often criticized the press, yet you've also relied on them for your platform. At what point does criticism become hypocrisy? Hypocrisy, please, he scoffed. That word gets thrown around by people who don't understand leverage. The press created me, yes, but they don't own me. I use them now, not the other way around. There were no laughs. Just silence. Tamron exhaled quietly, the camera catching the faint flicker of her patience cracking. So, to be clear, you don't see any contradiction in condemning the press, while simultaneously profiting from them? Harry leaned forward, his voice low and cutting. Do you see contradiction in hosting a show built on ratings while pretending it's about journalism? We all play the game, Tamron. Some of us just play it better. The jab landed hard, drawing a collective gasp. Tamron's lips pressed together, her hands tightening in her lap. For a beat, she said nothing. Then, with calm precision, she replied, I've built my career on respect and integrity. I don't ambush my guests, and I don't insult them. Harry smiled, sharp as a blade. And yet, here we are. The word stung. Tamron's smile vanished. The cameras captured her straightened spine, the anger in her eyes. Let me ask you something personal then, she said, her voice low, almost a warning. You've spoken about wanting to protect your family. But by exposing private matters publicly, haven't you endangered those very relationships? How does that align with your values? Harry gave a cold laugh. You're asking the wrong question. The right question is, why should I protect relationships that never protected me? The audience gasped again. Tamron's composure cracked slightly. That's a painful answer, she said softly. For them and for you. Harry shrugged, unapologetic. Painful, yes, but true. And I won't apologize for truth. The air was electric with tension. Tamron leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. Truth is powerful, but so is humility. Do you ever ask yourself whether your delivery might be costing you the very empathy you say you want? Harry's smirk deepened. Tamron, empathy is overrated. Respect is what matters. And if people can't respect me for speaking plainly, then their empathy was worthless to begin with. The audience fell into stunned silence. Tamron drew a slow breath. Maybe, she said, but respect has to be earned. And I think you may be forgetting that. Harry leaned back, his smirk unwavering. Or maybe the world just isn't ready for me. The arrogance was absolute. And in that moment, everyone knew the storm was about to break. The air in the studio was thick with tension. Tamron Hall had remained poised and professional for over 30 minutes. But Harry's final, arrogant statement was the last straw. He leaned back in his chair, his arms folded, a smirk on his face, seemingly believing himself untouchable. But something in Tamron finally snapped. She leaned forward, her voice steady but edged with steel. You know, Harry, you keep talking about truth and respect. But what I hear is entitlement. What I see is a man so wrapped up in his own grievances that he can't recognize when he's lost the room. The audience gasped. Harry's smirk faltered for the first time. Lost the room, he scoffed, trying to laugh it off. Tamron, with respect, the room has never mattered to me. I've spent my life performing for rooms that were never satisfied. I'm not here to win approval. Tamron's eyes locked onto his, the smile completely gone. No, she said, her voice rising. You're here to lecture, to dismiss, to act like every question is beneath you. And frankly, I'm done with it. The silence was electric. Done, he shot back, his tone sharp. Because I didn't bow to your questions? Because I didn't give you the sound bites you wanted? No, Harry. Tamron's voice was now fully charged with righteous anger. Because every answer you've given has been dripping with arrogance. You sit here mocking the press, mocking the audience, mocking me, while pretending it's all about service. But let's be honest, this isn't service. This is ego. The audience erupted in applause, finally breaking their silence. Harry's face flushed, his jaw tightening. You don't know me, he shot back, his voice cold. You don't know what I've survived. Tamron didn't flinch. You're right. I don't. But I do know arrogance when I see it. I do know the difference between a man sharing his truth and a man hiding behind his title to avoid accountability. Her words cut like glass. Harry shifted in his seat, visibly unsettled. Tamron pressed on, her tone unrelenting. You're not a working royal anymore. You chose to leave, and yet you carry yourself as though the world still owes you reverence. But this stage isn't Buckingham Palace. This is my show, and in my house, respect goes both ways. The audience clapped louder. Are you suggesting I don't deserve respect? He demanded. I'm saying respect isn't a birthright, Tamron shot back. It's earned. And the way you've spoken tonight, you've done nothing to earn it. The words hit harder than any prepared question. Harry opened his mouth, then closed it, his confidence faltering for the first time. Tamron leaned back, her decision clear. I think this interview is over. The crowd gasped. Excuse me. Harry stammered, stunned. You heard me, she said firmly. Prince or not, I don't allow guests to sit here and belittle me or this audience. You want to lecture people? Write another book. But you won't do it on my stage. Security, please show our guest out. The audience erupted, a mix of cheering and gasping in disbelief. Two stagehands moved toward the set, but Harry stood up before they reached him. His face was tight with fury, his jaw clenched. This is outrageous, he hissed. You'll regret treating me this way. Tamron didn't move. No, Harry. What's outrageous is thinking the rules don't apply to you. Goodbye. The crowd gave a thunderous applause as Harry stormed off the stage, ripping off his microphone and tossing it onto the chair with a final, angry flick of his wrist. He didn't look back. When the studio door slammed shut behind him, Tamron turned to the audience, her composure restored, her voice calm once more. Ladies and gentlemen, she said, sometimes conversations take turns we don't expect. But one thing I promise you on this show, we will always value respect, no matter who sits in that chair. The audience rose to their feet in a standing ovation. The band played over the noise as the credits began to roll. What had started as a routine daytime interview ended in chaos, with a royal storming off and an anchor holding her ground. The prince had come looking for control. Instead, he walked away stripped of it. And that's how one of the most explosive daytime interviews came to an end.